Okay, welcome everybody. So I had a choice to make when I titled this presentation. Should I mention that this is IT projects or should I just say projects? What I can tell you is, to be fair and sort of honest, I figured, I come from an IT background. Most of my project experience is from the IT world. I know that some of you at least are IT directors and might actually care if this applies to IT. So I did focus that, but I would ask you to challenge me to see if there's anything you see today that's not relevant to any project anywhere, or any portfolio projects anywhere, or any task list that might feed a project. Fair enough? Okay, so I'm Mike Hannan. With me presenting today is Jeff Mulatalo of Department of Human Resource Management. Just quick wave, Jeff. And John Angus of the Department of Technology Services. The reason I asked them to co-present with me, and you guys okay with this? This is okay?
Great.
The reason I asked them to co-present is because we put in place some ideas and concepts, methods that the consultant here thinks would be pretty cool. But I think much more interesting to you guys probably is whether this works, and if so, how. So we built in some content to offer that too. So let's see, a couple questions to make sure I understand my audience here. So how many don't care about IT? Just a couple of you, the guy in the back. How many are hoping that the challenges you face in your project environment, IT or not, can somehow be addressed, the needle can be moved a little bit, that the pain is just too great, there must be a better way? Wow, okay, you're my kind of people. So, so because I just saw so many hands, I want to share with you, that's why I'm here. I spent too many years suffering too much pain, not just myself and my family and things like that, but my people. As I figured out ways to succeed, usually on the backs of some heroic staff under me, right? I saw what it did to them. And so it's sort of a quest about finding a better way. So that might seem a little bit, setting the bar maybe a little bit too high, but why not set the bar high, right? Okay. So first, just a little bit of humor. An IT guy can't have a presentation and introduce humor without Dilbert, right? So can anyone in the back not read that? I don't mind reading it. So Dilbert is presenting his latest project saying our project plan will follow the usual arc. You see where this is setting up already, right? Phase 1 will be unwarranted optimism supported by the delusions of competence. In phase 2, the obstructionists will slither out of their lairs. Can you see the little slithering snake or whatever? And try to smother our dreams. I don't know about you, but I care about my projects. Sometimes my dreams are embedded in there. Ignorance and envy will fuel rumors that get repeated until they morph into common knowledge. Resources will be allocated based on misinformation and favoritism. Requirements will drift until the project is both undesirable and impossible. That brings us to the second week. And this is, of course, my favorite. I want my unwarranted optimism back. So again, call me the unwarranted optimist. The fact that a lot of you raised your hands looking for a better way, maybe you're unwarranted optimist too. So let's dive right into the techniques. We all agree there's problems here, and we'd like to get right to some solution stuff. So one of the foundational techniques is staggering of projects. This is, in my opinion, the more boring part of the presentation. So I'm going to go as quickly as I can through it. If there's any concept that's not clear, just stop me. One conceptual thing. They don't look like this here on Route 15, but does anyone recognize that? What's the purpose, ma'am? Metered access onto the highway on the on-ramps, right? Why? So we want to slow people down? Okay, how does that work? Like magic. So it's funny that in this, since we're doing kind of repeat sessions today, in this morning session I mentioned this, and I happen to have the experience, even though I'm not from here, of hanging out for a weekend and driving south to check out the gorgeous national parks. And Route 15 South on a Friday night flowed. But guys on the on-ramps, not so much, because they were waiting on these meters, right? From my perspective, it worked great. What if you're the guy on the on-ramp? Amen. If I have the assurance that once I'm on, it'll actually move, I might be okay, right? Okay. And there's industrial engineering, flow density stuff behind it, so the concept works. My thing is, why not do this for projects? So a simple example, and I almost don't care what A, B, and C are. Traditional project management or IT projects could be design, build, test. You know, I kind of define them slightly differently here. There might be something different in your environment. The concept, though, is simple. We have resources that have to finish their tasks before somebody else downstream can start, right? So imagine we got these 3 projects, pretty simple projects, right? Imagine we could deliver reliably in 7 weeks. Just stay in fantasy land with me for a minute. And we're going to start them all. And we get rush hour. And what people do in rush hour, look at poor resource A here. Do any of you really think he's going to be allowed to stick on this for a whole week without interruption? Someday I'll redraw this and show what I think it really happens. But I think it would take tiny little slivers of blue kind of sliced all over the place and bouncing around everywhere, right? And of course, any given project is only being worked on at best half the time in my simple scenario, right? So, ma'am, your name in front? So Stacy, imagine you're paying for all that. How's that feel? As a taxpayer, you are here, right? But everyone's busy, so I guess this is the best we can do. End of presentation. Right? Not the best we can do, is it? So let's compare that to a simple staggering approach. Now, again, I haven't exercised any magic here. Resource A still needs 2 weeks. Resource B needs 3 weeks. And I'm starting the 3rd project in week 7. So that's the guy that's the last in line on the on-ramp, right? And he's 4 weeks early. If I want a 4th project done, I don't need to hire more people. I just get the 4th project done. And somehow, magically, only one guy is actually busy the whole time. So take a good long look, see if there's any tricks I pulled. And any fast ones that the consultant's trying to slide past you. But yeah, this is the on-ramp, right? Now, question for you. Some people have said, well, we can't possibly have people sitting idle. That goes against all sorts of rules. But I would say, in real project land, have you ever had a hard time finding something valuable for somebody to do if he was really waiting? Is it really that hard I mean, are you that bad of a project manager? You can't find something valuable for, you know, document the lessons learned from the last thing we messed up so we don't mess it up next time, right? We can find all sorts of things to do. Now, real quick before I move on and show an example from DHRM, notice, if this guy can't actually focus on his task through to completion, remember Rami's speech at lunch, all about focus? In fact, let me give one little shout out to your dad again here. A journalist asked him, all this TOC stuff's very confusing and it's theories and who knows, so could you just tell us in one sentence what it's really all about? And he said, no, a sentence would be far too wordy. I'll give you one word, focus. But then how likely is it, how realistic is it to expect this guy to go 2 weeks with no interruptions? Challenging, isn't it? Right? Imagine the reality of your environment where you can execute for that long a period of time with no interruptions. I'll admit to you, I have as a father of 3 kids, I have a very difficult time single tasking them through breakfast, right? So we're gonna address that today too, but keep that in mind. So let's switch gears here. I'm gonna hand the microphone to Jeff. He's gonna talk about how we've implemented some of this with some of this proper planning. Would you agree? This also requires a lot of planning? Actually, I should say it differently. This requires good planning. Maybe not a lot of planning. And in fact, we'll talk about just how much planning we needed.
It's to the right, I'll do it. All right, so the experience we have in DHRM involves rewriting the system known as HRE. If you're an employee for the state of Utah, it houses all of the employment actions and the employment data. So kind of rewriting this is a fairly significant project. Are they racing over there? So let me just say, before coming to HR, I've been there now for 5-6 months, but when I came there, I had a certain view because I worked with Steve as an operational excellence consultant in GOMB. And I kind of had this conclusion after looking at the status of this rebuild, which is HRIS. It's a major development, and we're going to add things, introducing streamlined workflow for HR services, business intelligence tools. And I'd only been there for a couple of weeks, and I kind of thought to myself, oh boy, I'm not sure that this is appropriately queued up. And I actually told DTS, I was such a believer in single tasking and what Mike's been kind of outlining, I said, we will pause on our project if it means you will single task it later. I had that conversation with John Angus there. That kind of led to what we were going to focus on here today. The background is that the project experienced a false start due to the desire to initiate development work as soon as possible. One of my business analysts, when I got there, what his MO was, we need to keep DTS working. We need to meet with them more. We need to get pulse reads. And I kind of sat there and thought for a minute, okay, and when you're taking them away from development work to talk, you are taking them away from development work, right? So we kind of had some interesting discussions, but more or less the strained relationship that came from that came from the business side wanting movement immediately. It is basically what we saw here, where we wouldn't tolerate delay in having reports on activity, right? And it was that belief that would result in better time to delivery. So what I told my team is, here's our solution: full kit for development. I want to pause this until we have full kit. The last group that was here was like, well, what's full kit? So let me just cover this briefly. In our view, what full kit was on the business side, we're going to give the DTS developers everything they possibly need so that they can single task the matter at hand and write the code for the system. I think it's fair to say before, what happened is DTS got some very ambiguous suggestions from us and got to work because that's what we were asking for. And it required more meetings, more coordination. And I basically said, we're going to reset this. We are pausing this until we give them everything they need from us so they don't have to keep coming back and asking us for clarification. What did that look like? Well, it was a little bit larger than what I thought it was going to be honest. I was thinking operationally. Are we clear about our operational needs? And I kept asking, well, what does full kit look like? And it took a little while. Then, about mid-June, Mike Hannan came to work with us, and we kind of teamed up. Full kit looked like this. It had 4 pieces: a project management plan, a work breakdown structure, a project schedule, resource-loaded project schedule. There was no way to do this without being collaborative with the developers. So the bottom line was we were starting at ground zero. So I had kind of scheduled my senior business analyst and myself to say, we're going to start working on this in June, and we'll tell DTS we're going to pause, and we'll get you full kit by the end of August. That was what I was thinking. When we really focused on it, full kit took just, I'm going to say really, probably, fairly to say, is just over a week and a half. Was about how long that took to get these 4 things completed. And what that meant was, when we were done with full kit, the business side had a clean view of the operation to hand to DTS. We could, from that, produce a work breakdown structure so they could get task estimates and resource load it, and produce a project schedule upon which jointly we had a project management plan that we would govern. So the question was, how do we partner with DTS to give them everything they need to code, basically? How can we increase the precision and estimates related to scope, time, and budget? part of the reason why the relationship was strained is because you only know how the budget cycle is. We needed to spend the money by a certain month, and there wasn't clarity as to how to do that. So we wanted to do that. We wanted to reduce the time that the developers needed to invest in getting clarity. We viewed that as rework if we didn't give it to them on the front end. So we wanted to invest. It just was self-interest, if I'm going to be honest. We wanted to promote single tasking as well, and we wanted this to kind of be like a one-and-done approach to task completion. I really love my senior business analyst that was working with me, but my vibe was, if we have to keep having coordination meetings, we're not getting one and done. We're multitasking ourselves and them. So it took about more or less 6 steps. Establish the planning and discipline for full kit quickly, about a week and a half, just shy of 2. Break into staggered phases, and this is actually a great part of this project planning process. The first time we had a project plan for HRIS rebuild, it was going to take a year and a half to get a specific phase done. When we had staggered the phases and when we had the work breakdown structure, we actually got more scope in less amount of time, if that makes sense. There's 4 phases, but we merged 2 of the previous phases into one with a project plan to get it done in a year. So for us, that was a positive. Identify resource bottlenecks both in DTS and DHRM. Probably the most enlightening thing is that as it relates to an excellent project management plan, it wasn't like we could just hand this to DTS and say, well, tell us when you're done. We had to invest. We had to know where these pressure points were, where we had to make sure we expedited the waiting time they had for us, where it shifted to us. And that was incorporated in that plan. Run schedule acceleration scenarios, assessing impact on required resources in both agencies. So when the project plan is resource loaded, right, and there's task duration estimates, then we could look at the scope and say, how long would it take if we included this? And so we initially had a very large scope, but then we kind of kept saying, well, based on our priorities, let's get this focused pieces down and stagger it specifically. We got it down to like I said before, a 1-year plan with a project buffer that has a larger scope than what we had originally planned. Doing that together, we had kickoff, and then we adjust the plan as we go. Now when we meet with DTS, it isn't to kind of have them ask us what exactly we're talking about. It is to say, we may need to adjust scope. What's the impact on time and budget? So very positive, very good. Any questions from the business side? I think the bottom line message is, as a business, on the business side, I was ready to advocate waiting so they could single task, and I felt it was our responsibility to give them everything they needed to one and done it. Yeah?
So how did you anticipate your full kit? I mean, one and done, large project, start to finish, you had everything?
No. No. No, actually, to be honest with you, for a few weeks there, I kept asking, "What is full kit?" I didn't know, and I'd spoken with a few people.
That's what I was asking. Your full kit was more the framework, or it was the technical specifications, or a combination? How did you address that full kit?
I got an idea on this.
Okay, I'll let you respond before I respond.
Okay, I'm loud, so I don't need that. Generally, these guys hold it up here, I hold it down here. But generally what we found is we could go only so far. I wouldn't let my guys break this down to anything lower than days. I wouldn't let them break it down hourly by hourly. We're going to do that later. We're going to go all over that in a minute. But this was just getting some big blocks so that I could take it and do my thing with it. That's the whole thing I want, is give me that big block that I can understand kind of all the concepts. Let's get as much detailed workflow in there as possible from the business side. My guys can break that down into really good software. So let's go ahead and get that in place. And that is what's needed, is getting that going in there, getting those blocks. If it's a 40-day task on the project plan, I'm going to break that into lots of little pieces. But I needed those big blocks, and my guys could estimate that. I mean, what development project do you do that doesn't have a form, a database, a report? I mean, generally that's what we're dealing with. We've done this before, we can do it again. Granted, some of the graphing, some of the other things, but that's all making pretty on reports, so it's good.
And I just think from our end, from the business side, I just to be forthcoming, in HR, we didn't have all of our business defined operationally in terms of how it flowed, how things operate. So we process map everything. We did fast diagrams, swim lanes, and then inside those swim lanes, we basically included any piece of information that is of relevance to DTS and handed that all over to them for task duration estimates. And so the task duration estimates were less, there's still an element of guesswork, but they were much more informed. This was informed guesswork as opposed to guesswork. And that kit ended up being very helpful for us to kind of finalize the plan between both sides.
Thanks, Jeff. One more quick comment on this full kit stuff, because I appreciate the passion and energy from the question. Full kit to get started on execution. Okay? The big mistake most of the project management world makes, and even though I'm a big active participant in PMI, read the PIM box someday, all 500 odd pages. Tell me how many pages are devoted to execution. It's 90% planning. And if you actually followed everything that the PIM box tells you to do just for planning, you would get a full kit that's about 3 years long, in my opinion, okay? So full kit in this case is full kit to start. By the time we're done, we're gonna need a whole lot more. But we can work that as we go. Okay, keep going. You've heard us talk about this already. I wanna show you the power of this though, beyond just hearing people like us talk about its goodness, as if it's just some sort of inherently good thing that is kinda hard to achieve anyway. As a software guy, I learned actually from my son, who figured out how to solve these because I never could, that this is just a series of algorithms put together in a certain sequence that you have to almost intuit. There's not like depending how your puzzle is scrambled, you don't always know what algorithm to apply when in what sequence. And of course, this one's more complex. And so I want you to ask yourselves, whether you're in software engineering or not, how much does your work resemble the easier cube versus the hard cube? And if I were to if I were to interrupt my son on the hard cube, he'd have to re-scramble and start over. So that's not just okay, I've got to think about it and ramp up for 5 seconds and I'm good again. That could be a complete loss of productivity of all the work that's already been done. So ask yourselves what level of complexity you're being interrupted on, and the price goes up. So to give you some metrics to kind of make it more real, imagine that you're playing this game with me, and we're going to make it three very simple projects: alphabets, numbers, and shapes. If I had a little more time, it'd be fun to actually play it. Whoever wants me to send you the soft copy of this so you can play it with your teams, let me know. But basically, we're going to say round one, you have to say the letter A, the number 1, and a rectangle, then the letter B, the number 2, and a triangle. Sorry, circle. I'm already getting confused. And row by row. And then time the whole thing for all 3. Take a break, and then we do this round 2, and we just do A through Z, 1 through 26, and the shape pattern, and we time that. Any guesses on which one's faster? Probably round 2. I've yet to come across a single person that's not at least a little faster, and the usual speed gain, well, I'll show you in a minute. So Amy, you played this game in a class a few months ago. Do you remember what your speed gain was? Was it like 10% better? 40% faster? Cool. Here's what the typical results are group after group. Now, because I'm a stats geek, in addition to being a projects geek, I actually measure what my groups do and record it on an ongoing basis and then update my curves here. So first round, it's about 2 minutes on average. Best I've seen is about 90 seconds. Worst I've seen goes out to about 4.5 minutes. Right there, do you see a problem? It's pretty widespread if you're trying to manage this project, huh? And again, this is an easy project, agreed? Check out round 2. So Amy said she got 40%. That means somebody got like 300% to average it out to double. Okay? I actually did this with my, I have two 16-year-old boys, and because they're terrible at focusing on their homework, since school started, this week, I sat them down on Sunday, and I made them play the game, and they actually got exactly double, so it's kind of cool. And of course, if we're trying to actually plan things, we certainly would prefer the more predictable one, would we not? Hard enough with all the unknowns in project land that come back to bite us. So that's an awesome picture in my view. But there's one aspect to this that I like even better than the speed and the reliability, as great as those are. Any guesses to what I like even better than those two? Anybody see anything on the chart there that looks like a third thing that's pretty awesome? How fast is your fastest guy in round one? And how fast is that compared to your slowest guy in round two? Think about that. I know these are simple projects, alphabets and numbers and all these things, but that means that you can have your whole team become better than your best guy. Think of the power of that in your own organizations. Pretty amazing, huh? So actually, who doesn't believe it? Who thinks I've skewed the numbers just to make the point look better? So you all believe it? Okay, great. So then the question is, okay, if it's that powerful, how do we make it real? Well, I can give you, oops, sorry, middle out of order. Before I tell you about how to make it real, let's look at the impact on our throughput. So we started with 3 projects, remember? Remember we could do 3 in 13 or 17 weeks? And we got it to 4 with some staggering. That's where we are here. And Amy, I think you said you got a 40% improvement. So let's be modest. Let's not assume double. But let's still assume something pretty meaningful. 35 sounds about right to me. Look at how that's amplified on your throughput. I could actually get almost double throughput even though I'm not necessarily twice as fast. Pretty powerful how that gets amplified, huh? So I promised you my total, we would get to 2x. Agreed that we've already hit that from 3 projects to 7. We've exceeded that goal so far. But I'll admit to you, this is still kind of cool concept and pretty colors and cartoons, but what about reality? So in order to deal with the slowdown that reality we know will give us, we're going to do something a little bit better to make sure we get these benefits and we can maximize them further. So these are just some key pointers, and I'll kind of race through them because you can read them. Some of these will work for you. Sometimes your boss might not let you, or your spouse or your kids will interrupt you too much. I offer them as tips and tricks that work for me and many other people that I help. But I will admit to you that we still live in a culture of responsiveness in every organization I've ever been to. Would you agree? That there's still an expectation when the boss calls, you will pick up. Doesn't matter if you're on the hard Rubik's Cube, does it? Or your most angry, demanding customer expects responsiveness. And so while there are solutions to this, and I think you heard some from Rami at lunch, I think if you're like me, you might still wrestle with, okay, but I'm not the head of the agency. I'm not the governor. I can't really change much about how my boss operates, right? I got to do something myself, and these bullet points here might be fine, but I want more. Can you give me more? So that's what we're going to talk about next. And that's this last technique to actually get a single tasking method to work. And not only are we going to make it work for single tasking, we're going to build in some ways to maximize flow as we go. So we're going to get more than just a regular speed benefit. We're going to get maximum flow benefits across our whole team. I can't remember if I hand this to you. Ooh, yeah.
This is you. This is me. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about this. So earlier on, it was interesting. The DTS executive management was in here in the first presentation, which was really great. They just didn't really know I was going to be here. And so it was kind of fun presenting that for the first time to them. And but luckily, my boss is here. Darcy's here, and she knew. So at least somebody did know I'm not doing this and not flying without a net. But we talked a little bit earlier about this resource B problem because they're always a little bit further. And I've got to admit, Based on everything I have a few resource B problems. It's generally development. It's these guys that need to be heads down, knocking out code. Even more than that, my software architects. Have you tried to hire a software architect in this town lately, or anywhere? It's near impossible. It's difficult. So how do I help them? And I always mess this up. How can we boost their productivity? And not even boost their productivity, how do we actually make their life better? That's the one that I wanted to do. I mean, I could stand over their cube and make sure they were knocking out code all day because I could watch them. Make sure that they're not answering IMs and different things like that. But we kind of flipped that on its head in a different way, and we found a different way to maximize resource B, and that's through this claim method he mentioned. Now, first we got to go back to a little bit of theory of constraints. So I know my constraint right now is this development staff. They just have to do some certain things to get code out and tested and into people's hands. So how do we lean that out? I got to see what they're working on, but how can I see it without asking them 10 times a day? How can I enable them to pull the work instead of me telling them what to do? How do I get down to them not working on 11 things at once? We actually did a test before we started. We found that developers generally worked on 11 things. That was what they were working on. Work in progress, 11 things. How many do you think they finished a week? 2. And those lists just got bigger and bigger the more projects that came in. Hey, John Angus is great. He gets lots of projects done. Let's use his staff. Well, there's a breaking point in that. And then, of course, we talked about this work in process. Let's get that down to single tasking. So how did we do it? So one thing we did allow, we talked about these high-level tasks on a project plan. And some of them are 20 days, 30 days, 10 days, whatever, 1 day. But one thing that we talked about with the developers is I said, I want to break everything down to 1 day. And I started getting tasks back, and they were breaking things down to 2 hours. And I said, no, I want it to be a day, or at least a half a day. They said, no, don't take away my granularity. And what I found, that granularity meant a ton. Because maybe the 1 day task is build this page. Make sure it ties out to the database. Well, no. One of the tasks is build your database table. Next task is make sure it ties to the logic. Next task is make sure the logic ties to the front end. Oh, by the way, I have a front end developer that can do that. So push that. We can now spread the wealth of where different things go. We manage what happens next by feeding the task board appropriately. I make sure that I've got this high-level project plan that we've developed, and I'm not putting it on the task board until it's about the right time. We found about two and a half weeks ahead, so these guys can start breaking it down and flowing on it. So feeding the machine is what he says. We've made it visible through a tool. We have a requirement that it goes one at a time. It's been difficult. We set up a little thing, visual management, a little app that we can just see it. We can find bottlenecks. We know when things are stuck. We maximize flow while ensuring single task discipline is where we need it most. Now, this is how we figured it out. How do we know what's happening? I have 6 developers. I should have 6 tasks in progress or in doing. Very easy. Even I can do that math. And Amy and I went to school together. She knows I'm not good at it. So we have number of tasks. What's even better is if I can get more owners. Let's say that really constrained resource, that software architect, he isn't assigned a task. His job is to unstick. I always say unstuck. His job is to get people unstuck. And then they start going faster. He helps them break down their tasks. He helps them architect something. He gets in there and does some of that dirty work. But I've got my best guy now trying to help everything keep going across the board. So this is where it actually proves out. This is kind of the punchline of the whole thing for me, is these are the number of tasks and the number of days. Mike came out 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago? I can't even remember. And he did a little presentation, and I just zeroed on, gosh, you know what? My guys need focus. We're doing 55 projects at once. They're doing 11 tasks at a time. What can we do? And so he comes in and says, well, here's a little way to manage it. So we start putting into place, and our first month was a little rough. We weren't showing major increases, and we saw a ton of red. Now what the red, I'll go ahead and pop this open. These are lapses in single tasking. I had one guy had 7 things on his task board, all work in progress, all stuck. You know, let's take some time to get those unstuck and get those moving. And we bring those down. This is where I get to be a manager. And instead of saying, why don't you do this, and why don't you do that, and why don't you do that, I'm saying, I'm going to remove this obstacle, and this obstacle, and this obstacle so you can fly. And what we saw as we started rolling it out, granted, the reason why the yellow line goes up at kind of a steady pace there, we have added people. We started with 5, went to 14, and then jumped up to about 40 that are using the task boards. But what we saw was this is how we were doing, and I kept waiting for it to taper off and match the other line. It keeps going crazy. So we saw, even by the month, we're about 250. In the last week, we did almost 375 tasks, just flowing. One of the things that I did, and this is very tough to do. How am I doing on time? I'm out?
Got about 5.
Okay. One of the things that we had to get our heads around a little bit with these guys is, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What we had to do with these guys, we were seeing the task thing go up, is what I had to do is they have these high-level project plans. They gave me an estimate. They do all this stuff. And guess what I told them? Forget about the project plan. And I said, I want to see how fast you can go. I want you to be, nobody says, hey, you know what, American Pharaoh, can you do this 15 yards in like 8 minutes? Good job, you just met your goal. I want to see if he can be the best in the world. I want to see if he can win the Preakness. I want to set land speed records with my team. Take off all the stuff and remove their impediments. They fly. They really can. The only thing that I feel like I'm controlling half the time is, does this relate back to the project plan? And are we getting stuck? That's a great place to be as a manager. It's much better than, shoot, this guy doesn't have anything to do today. What am I going to, I need to go and get him something to do. So, we put this in place. It's very simple. It's a little app. We just move the things over. It doesn't take long to implement. This is very basic concepts. I mean, it's a to-do list. Let's not tell Mike this is a to-do list with some extra features on it. It's like crossing it off. We think we can get to posting amazing things. We really do. Resource B, we're eliminating a lot of the stuff that they struggle with of distractions, and we do need to get better at staggering our projects. That is one thing. If you go back to that cumulative flow diagram on a single project, it still has that up, slant. It has a very weird kind of trajectory. Okay, these are the problems with it. Some people said, hey, this is just another way for you to micromanage us. I said, have I stood in your cube and asked you what you're doing, what you're working on today? Guess what? I checked one of my projects today, and we're already 7 tasks in on that project. And guess where I was? I was here. I didn't have to care. I just know that it's flowing, and none of them were stuck, so I don't feel like I have to make a call. Tech leads view this as just a task board. They're starting to get some ownership now, which is going a little bit better. They're brainstorming ways to make it better. Utilization goals, we're still working through some of that. You know, if you're going as fast as possible and you've got billable hours, sometimes you can't make up the difference on the end of that. There is some downtime. Most managers support the concept, have yet to change behavior. This is me. I'm really trying not to go and get that one thing from that one guy. How many things do you think can wait for an email? Maybe I could just send an email. Maybe I could send it at the end of the day so I know they won't check it. Maybe I could just hold off on that distraction. Maybe I don't need that information right now and I can just let him work. We still have too many projects. Like I said, I'm working 55 projects with around 20 developers. That's a problem. We're getting that leaned out. We're just going to keep going staggering, and then at the end, I'll let you do the whole end part.
I was going to say, before I let John go, give him some questions.
So in this scenario, who's the architect? If I'm the developer and I'm just tasking, I want to make sure that every task is adding up to the project. I mean, have you already filtered that before it gets to them? And if so, how do they know whether what they've coded?
I populate the to-do, and then I let them break it down. So the high-level project plan helps populate what's next. I just don't populate it until it's time.
So we talked about this at lunch.
Yeah.
You can't focus on task. You've got to focus on system. So who's focusing on the system in this?
Okay, I do have some software architects that got us to this point. We have some core architecture that we build everything on. We're very kind of adamant that you stick with it. We don't just take on willy-nilly, oh, we're going to use this off-the-shelf code over here and that off-the-shelf code over there. We actually have got some things to a science. A developer isn't a developer isn't a developer. I do have software leads. I do have some that take one for the team and help break down tasks. A high-level software architect, just because he knows if he breaks those down right, the team will do it correctly. So they have a higher view into everything that's going on. They were part of the project planning process. We step in once in a while and say, hey, look how we did. We actually saw 2 projects, the milestones come in 1 month early, just by implementing this, just because we were flowing. And we didn't try to hold everybody to the estimate they gave all the time, because you're going to fill that up anyway. You can't help it.
Add one more. There's another piece of your question that I'm not sure we addressed, and that is the architecture work up front before development can begin. Those tasks may not always lend themselves to breaking into granular pieces and flowing on a task board. Someday maybe we'll get there, right? The world of projects may someday get there, kind of like 150 years ago a shoe cobbler was a project manager. Today there's a Nike factory for that, right? We don't really do it that way.
So I think the way to say that is, John, what you're saying is you still have your Scrum approach. I mean, you're still going to reset, but within modules rather than
Yeah, and
task individually. At some point, you have to regroup and say, overall, do some of these tasks equal?
We have to know when something's done, and you have to be able to collapse that down. What's nice now is that we're seeing a whole full thing done that's actually testable in some type of thing. In one case, we had one we were able to slice it down to pieces that could be done monthly, and they're actually going to production monthly. That's a cool place to be. Not all projects can do that.
so anything you might lump into concept refinement automatically is a little fuzzier and is more of a human art. And there's ways to accelerate it, of course, but I might not use this solution for that. If I then take the same architect and say, now you're going to move in development mode and help your team develop and lead the way, now all of a sudden that guy does have this granularity to work through. So that kind of gets to my final wrap-up point, and then we still have some time for questions. So again, I promise you this wouldn't just be IT specific, even though the examples, we can't help it. Most of us here have, we gave you IT scenarios, but we are starting to apply this in other conditions. In fact, we have one prospective client who leads a group of aircraft mechanics. He's wondering if this can help his guy single task. And basically, as long as these 4 conditions exist, I don't see why not. So this is, I used to say as long as there's one resource pool. Now I'll say as long as you can manage it as a group. They don't all have to have the same boss, for example. You don't have to wait for the reorg, right? As long as you have some hope of managing a pool of resources as a group. You do have to make sure that you actually can have a ready supply of fine-grained tasks. Your question earlier, sir, about some of the architecture thinking work, that's probably where that fails. Right? How do I actually feed a flow from stuff I can't quite even estimate or measure? Certainly not in a granular way, right? Not fine-grained. So John touched upon this briefly. Remember he had the slide that says he has a number of task owners as 6, and then the number of tasks being worked, also 6. So that's a nice one-for-one sort of single tasking governance approach. And what even better, though, we found is if you always have a little bit of extra capacity, and in fact, I think Rami mentioned some to have a successful organization, we want some extra capacity in certain places. Well, we want extra capacity to actually help improve the flow of some of the team. So if I have 2 guys that are available who can help a junior developer move his tasks along when he gets stuck, I might want 8 task owners. I'm sorry, 8 people, and then 6 tasks open. Does that make sense? I got 2 extra folks there. So that's what this slightly fewer means. This pull thing is really important. Some of you, it sounds like you have some Agile and Scrum background, so there's a team autonomy thing where the team on most things tends to know more than the boss. One of the things they know better than the boss is when they're ready for their next task. And they know what kind of speed records they're after today, not just the pace that the boss sets for them. That's it, those 4 things. This has not been around, I mean, these concepts come from theory of constraints and some lean and some other stuff that you saw. Been around for 30 or 40 years, maybe longer if you go back to some examples in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, perhaps. But bottom line is this kind of approach with this task board and this kind of fine-grained working off of a Gantt chart and all this stuff, it's only been really active for 2 or 3 years. It's sort of new. And there's only a few practitioners that I'm aware of that are doing it in this way. And the pattern of results is starting to achieve 2x and 3x pretty quickly. By the way, that blows my mind. As somebody who's managed software development teams my whole career, thought I was pretty successful at it, and I never knew enough to do it this way. And remember I mentioned the pain and suffering of my teams earlier? Least I could do is maybe help relieve some pain and suffering for other teams, right? So I believe, to wrap, we're really just talking about getting a lot more done. Who goes to work in the morning saying, I think I'd like to minimize my impact today? Right? We want to get more done. Obviously, we care about doing the right things, and we trust that we have ways to focus there. But these are pretty simple approaches to getting a whole lot more done. So with that, questions for any of the 3 of us? Sir.
I realize that this presentation was directed mostly towards IT development, and then I kind of touched on user acceptance testing, but how has your success been with coordinating user acceptance testing?
Have we had a chance to really see that yet, John?
We've seen it on 2 projects. What I've seen is obviously that whole full kit discussion at first, we were part of that. Now granted, the business helped drive a lot of that because they run the priorities. When we started getting into it, we start seeing this stuff come down because you're getting stuff a lot, or you're getting actual, hopefully programmed work a lot earlier. We're able to bring them in, but we see more constant user acceptance throughout the project than a big bang user acceptance at the end. On a recent DEQ project, we actually keep closing off old access databases while our program just keeps taking over and finishing those off, which has been really nice. But the one that came in a month early, that was acceptance tested, put in production a month earlier. It's not like we just finished the work. That's what was kind of cool.
So was there something behind that question, Sarah, like you struggled with that phase, or it just gets stuck there and the flow stops?
It was interesting, you said DEQ, access databases.
That's your world?
Well,
Got it. We can maybe chat more of that on the break if it's of interest.
Can't let go.
Other questions, folks? Happy to take one or two more, even though I think we're technically out of time. We'll hang around. Ma'am.
Oh man, I'm like the grassroots group right now. This is not across the board by any means. So if you go back to your agency or something and say, hey, John Angus said you have to do this, you got to realize I'm not a level that I could ever say that. I mean, my bosses didn't even know I was here today. So, but there is some, I mean, if you want to explore some of it, call me even. I actually had somebody, I wish I could sit with you for an hour, and I said, okay, I'll just show you what the best thing about this is logging in that next day and seeing that 7 things got done on a project you care a lot about. We're not fully transparent for everyone, but we're getting closer, and it's a cool concept, but it takes some interesting leadership and some negotiation with the developers and stuff that isn't negotiated.
What I would encourage you to consider, ma'am, is this should be quick. This shouldn't be a multi-year rollout. We started the board like within a week after we decided we were ready. And it's only been a couple of months in operation. That whole green mountain you saw is a 2-month period, but think about how that spike went in 2 months. So we hopefully were honest enough with the key challenges and all the things we have yet to do, or that they have yet to do. But it shouldn't take long. In fact, I had one client roll all this out across a 40-person team in 2 days and just get started.
Yeah, we want to see what this looks like in a year still. But I don't think it's going to take it's not going to take that long to get other people. So.
And I guess, I mean, obviously you hired an outside consultant, but was it driven from the HR side or from the DTS side, these changes for this?
We had a class from Micah, and I went and talked to him, and I said, can we do this? And Darcy gave me enough cover to let me go.
So this is actually a cool, quick story. GeoMB paid for a training class because people said they wanted more PM training. I gave the class. He said, you didn't talk enough about single tasking. Do you have any more tricks in your bag of tricks on that? I said, yeah, actually I do. Want to try it? Other questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.